What's up, everybody? This is Karak with ACG, and as always, it's my mission to bring you reviews that aren't 2 minutes long or filled with sponsored bullcrap. And today's title is the Will It Ever Actually Get Released platformer simulator known as The Last Guardian, which was announced in 2007 for the PS3, and lo and behold, gets actually released this week for the PS4. Let's see if Last Guardian is Sony's purebred Sonawesomes to Nintendo's Nintendogs, or if it's the sad mud its sometimes troubled development warned it would be, aging in dog years right past its prime. As always, if you like the video, maybe subscribe. So here's my review for Last Guardian. Acrophobia the game, the world's unluckiest kid, and watching fantasy dogs fail in slow motion on YouTube. Graphics are up first. You know, for a game originally planned for the PS3 and then scrapped later and built up for the PS4, for the most part, Last Guardian comes away generally unscathed with an almost challenge-like one-upsmanship attitude towards grandeur and size and scope. And let's be honest, the game boils down to the childlike thought process of seeing someplace and saying, let's go there. And at times, it's like the devs sat in a room and said, I bet I can make a place this big to explore. And someone else said, yeah, well, I can make a place even bigger. And they just kept steamrolling out of control. I mean, if there's one thing that Last Guardian has, it's excellent artistic and architectural design, even if they aren't always backed up by performance. Now, leaping across the crumbling structure of mysteriously built towers in an almost Mario-like series of leaps on Trico's back to watching him dive into the massive pools of water you explore later and that huge wave rolling over you and his eyes glowing underwater as he emerges, it is absolutely phenomenal. Now, there's an overall artistic style here that is held to with almost military precision, and its strict desire to show you a particular world organically and the viewpoints of the characters within it, and it plays out both within the normal gameplay as well as some of the more unique parts you encounter later on in the title. Now, when it comes to animations, which is something Last Guardian's been lauded for since the first time it was shown, the game is actually pretty outstanding, with crumbling runes exploding from your ill-timed adventurousness, or Trico just trying to follow you regardless of his not understanding that he can't fit through a human-sized hole. And I have to say the creature itself is excellently designed and animated. Sure, the first time you see him, you might think, wow, a cat, dog, bird, and opossum in my worst nightmare just had a baby. But over time, its true look begins to really grow on you, and that's connected at a very basic level with the use of the animation to depict mood, or the color of the creature's eyes to depict its current state, in a desire to really get you, the player, to emotionally connect with the creature. Now, it works for more or less degrees on different players, I'm sure, but regardless, it's information while not being some kind of HUD element, and that's actually very cool to see. And I really like the main character and their design as well, and the animation for movement is almost uncanny. Now, the devs have discussed in detail how difficult the game was to develop, and it certainly seems this might have been one of the culprits. The other is frame rate, because sadly, it does drop on the PS4 Pro and normal PS4, and while not always impacting gameplay due to the way the game controls, the camera is another beast entirely. And by beast, I mean this thing literally tries to run away. And there's a couple design points that are really odd here. For reasons unknown, the camera has momentum assigned to it, meaning as you sweep left or right, the camera picks up speed dramatically the more you hold it, meaning a good deal of overshots, as the camera movement is also tied into frame rate, meaning the momentum you can feel is almost random at times depending on if you are also getting a steady frame rate while panning. Also, the camera has incredible trouble with the tighter spots in the game and flicks and glitches, especially on the creature's back, which can be friggin' infuriating, and yes, that's fully patched up. Now, while sad to see a game that looks this good artistically being impacted by those technical issues, it's still a testament to vision when you play it, and yes, it may have horrendously low detailed textures right next to a high detailed mural depicting the world's strangest language, but in the end, you usually can move past that to the next epic set piece. As a package, the game is actually still phenomenal to experience visually, despite some issues with performance and a camera that I can only describe as basically functional. In the end, only a couple indications of the troubled development cycle remain: sound, music, and voice.
Ini juga itisos. Adnaite tawaktu ada jirara boy otoriku. Iso uni you tuti. Ona ananatu onits.
And And here's where we get to see a team that understands how to handle environmental sound and its processes expertly. From the sharp and tight reverb of the creature's terrifying roar off cave walls to the open, airy wind in your hair, we are just how high up echoey breezes that blow past your head on towers that are simply built too high to be anything other than crumbling jump locations. Even the creepy thumping stomp of the enemy soldiers as they try to recapture you. It's all just completely spot on, but a high point for me is Trico himself, and it's done really well. Far more sound than voice. His lonely calls to you when you leave a room is actually a bit heart-wrenching, as is the strange snorts and weird surprise squeaks he makes when he barely makes a jump, or the satisfied blow of air and shiver he performs when he eats, whatever it is he is actually eating in this game. Excellent sound throughout, and while not as varied as other titles, simply due to the fact that you don't have a large repertoire of ancient weapons in your toga of carrying +5. Really, in the audio version of what you see is what you get. Attention to excellent minimalistic design is noticeable here from the moment you turn it on to the last scene after the credits have rolled. Excellent. Music. So this is actually really good, while a bit muted and certainly open to just not playing through large stretches of the title. When the music does play, it is excellent. From thin piano solos that accompany your first times you step outside, to low, almost dirge-like horn sections as you climb the walls of some forgotten city building that no one knows the use of anymore. While there are slightly more orchestral pieces in The Last Guardian, my favorite here was the minimalistic voiced instrument tracks that really helped to solidify the moment, both visually but now sort of audibly. It's not for everybody, and certainly for some, they're actually going to consider it relatively thin as the soundtrack goes, but for me, it's a really perfect showing. Voice. Okay, so this one's a little hard. So most of the voice in the game is the voiceover of the main character as an older man telling you about the adventure, and it's done well, if very, very sparingly. Sometimes he pops in to alert you to a possible situation coming up or what just happened, but most of the time it's more like someone seeing a photograph and discussing a thought about it years later. Minimalistic and pretty good, but not really great. It does what it sets out to do. Gameplay. So let's start out with story for just a second. You basically awake as a boy next to a locked-up creature, which turns out to be the pissy and hurt Trico, and at this point you begin to learn the various gameplay elements that make up the core gameplay loop, like feeding him when hurt or tired, calling him to your location, understanding his basic moods, and helping him when he's hurt, like pulling out spears from his body. With little fanfare, you basically begin a growing partnership that extends to other gameplay elements as you continue, like swimming, petting him to calm him down, sicking him on enemies, and so forth. Now, while both a puzzler and a platformer, Last Guardian's excellence is within its understanding that these two are a team, whether first learning you can ride him as he leaps into the sky to a perch that just screams bad idea, to moving feed barrels to specific areas to have him investigate them, or giving him the gumption to take some pretty insane leap of faith, or the first time you see him cowed in terror from something. It's not long before you begin to have an understanding that your best bet on survival is riding the bat thingy creature to safety, but also the reverse, with you slowly understanding that the creature fears particular things within the environment and game world as well, and you will have to remove them before you can both continue. And through those experiences, you then begin to discover more things through the development of the relationship, like learning signs of distress, signs that he can see something interesting in the environment, or indicating he can jump somewhere you may not have seen, or even catching you out of the air when you miss a jump where he swings his tail around to give you something to grab onto before you fall. Now, the puzzles in Last Guardian are anything but difficult and build on the organic feeling that Last Guardian really wants to present, which for some gamers could result in some frustrating moments, as some jumps don't line up right, or puzzles are figured out almost as if you feel like you were cheating because they don't really have a very specific thing in mind for you to actually complete them. Now, that's all built within the title on purpose, and the loss of that feeling is supposed to mimic two living creatures exploring an organic game world versus one that is gamified, so be aware of that. Also, the puzzles stay interesting regardless, due to the developer's stringent desire to keep things as minimal as possible and have them moments of teamwork, where momentarily one of you can do without the other, but sooner rather than later, that's going to turn into a bad situation. For example, later puzzles progress to battles, where enemies carry items that frighten the creature, and so instead of him just basically smashing the enemies into their requisite atoms, he cowers away, leaving you almost completely defenseless. But if you push over the enemy, they will drop their equipment, and Trico will go into honey badger mode, placing a do not disturb honey badger in process of killing everyone's sign over the door, and then straight up immolating everyone in the area. And I love that. Those were great moments. It's just strangely satisfying, especially due to how you personally are so weak compared to the enemies in the game. Also, I found this cool, basic perfection in the way the game mets out puzzling with platforming with story. And make no mistake, it's still told in that what exactly is occurring style of Shadow of Colossus, but with its basis on teamwork with another living creature, at least it's not so lonely here. Also, there are some truly outstanding moments, like when you realize that the creature can just up and miss, resulting in you leaping, hoping he's going to catch you by the collar, only to have a long drop and a sudden stop. You have to be very careful in some areas with what you're doing, and that sort of mimics that organic feel to the puzzling and platforming I discussed earlier. Now, all that taken into consideration, iteration, I can't say I was in love with the game all the time. The controls, there were some issues there, and even ignoring the camera issues that the title has, the control can just feel odd, and it's sometimes really haphazard openness to things like direction-based jumps. For reasons unknown, sometimes it just doesn't happen. It's not terrible, but certainly it's something that you may need to get a bit accustomed to as you start playing. And once again, while it's directly connected to the organic feeling in which the developers have built this game, it is still a little bit haphazard. Altogether, it was about 8 to 9 hours max, even while taking the time to look around, and its overall grandeur and presentation made it actually feel a little bit longer than that, so that was very cool. Fun factor. Yeah, it was fun. It was in a different way. Yeah, it's an experienced game, and while there are fun moments, it was more of a passive kind even during the rushed bits. It's highly enjoyable, but you really have to know what you're getting into, because one of the first things that will probably pop in your mind when you're playing this is, who in the hell built this place? Absolutely nothing makes sense. But that's on purpose, to aid in that feeling of alien-like discovery, and it does that incredibly, incredibly well. So, as you guys know, I rate games on a buy, wait for sale, rent, or never touched again rating scale. This is easily a buy for its price. Listen, it's not perfect, and that frame rate and camera, I would love to see those get some fixes. But overall, those issues do very little to mar an otherwise awesome experience, and one that really shouldn't be missed by anybody who has a PS4. So anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys liked the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Hey, maybe check out Twitter or Patreon. As always, if you want reviews that aren't 2 minutes long and filled with sponsored bullcrap, stick with ACG. Peace out, and enjoy the rest of your week.